Welcome. My name is Satish, and we're at and this year is Code to Career. So, quick introduction for those of you all who are joining us for the first time. What is Code to Career? The aim of Code to Career is to create a community for software developers, especially those with little to no working experience. It's a place for them to get information on what to expect in the working world. I've worked with many juniors and interns over the years, and this is my way of trying to help them bridge the gap when entering the professional space. This is a stream I'm hoping to do every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. For those who are coming along or watching this outside of those times, we have a Discord board as well. So the link is down below if you just scroll down a bit. Do jump in, ask your questions. We're here to help. So before I get going, this will be probably the first of 8 sessions. And I've tried to kind of break up what I would like to talk about into those 8 sessions, but it's not something that is really going to break up easily because there's a wide range of topics that we will be talking about. So from session to session, we'll probably retouch some of the same topics. We'll chat about some of the same things, but from a different focus, from a different angle. Some disclaimers. I am not claiming to be any kind of expert. I will share what I have learned, what I have seen, what I know new employees struggle with. But not everything works for everyone. We kind of have to pick and choose what makes sense for each of us, what fits with our style and with our attitude. We will also talk about a number of things that can seem very abstract. This is what happens when you have little to no experience in the actual working world, is that you have no way of understanding unless you've been in those situations and in those environments. But remembering what we talk about will shine a light on the situations if and when we ever encounter them. There are a wide range of companies, cultures, and environments out there. So there's a decent chance that we will talk about things that you may never encounter in your career. Nonetheless, forewarned is forearmed. And the aim of this channel is to try to give you as much information as possible. And even if some of it is of some use, then at least that's been a help. So we'll start off with kind of focusing on today's main topic, which is the developer mindset. Many juniors I've seen who come along and start in the workplace really have a very poor idea on how to think about where they're working, the problems that they're trying to solve, the scopes involved, how big is what I'm working with, how many people are affected by what I'm working with. This is not something that they unfortunately give too much thought to. They kind of come in, they expect to be given a set of work and given some deadlines, and that's what they have to do. They expect to come in, they'll sit, they'll work for the 8 hours of the day, and they'll go home, and they'll come back the next day, and they'll do more of the same. And that's not the reality. The reality is you will have a variety of things that you will go through during your day, from meetings to updates and reports, planning. There are a number of different types of people you'll interact with, from testers, designers, team leads, managers, business analysts, and many others who will have reason to come and speak to you on a daily basis. And all of these we'd kind of cover session by session, these different individuals, these different roles, and how do we interact with them, and what I've come across in terms of what works and what does not work. But in actually thinking about what you have to do, what I've really found helps, and what's very different from the mindset of what you come out of from whatever studies you've been doing, is the fact that software development is about cataloging information. You don't need to know everything about everything off by heart, but you do need to know it exists and what it basically is. And this is a big difference between the studies type mindset that people come from, where even in the practical portions, you're expected to learn things, to by heart things, to know things offhand and at any point in time in terms of the development work that you've been doing. And it's not like that in the real world. Lack of knowledge is your enemy, but not the kind of knowledge where you don't have something memorized off by heart. It's the type of knowledge that something exists. So what do I mean by lack of knowledge? Imagine all the software knowledge out there is like a massive library. New books are coming in and going out all the time. What you have studied or are currently studying, it basically shows that you can read and understand the books in this library. What it does not show is that you know everything in this library. The problem is that there's just too much to read. There's too much information. Even with your course textbooks, many times you'll do maybe 5 out of the 30 chapters. I remember in almost every course I did at Varsity, where it'd be like, okay, so you've got your textbook, there's 40 chapters. For this course, we're doing only a few of them. And the rest of them, don't bother, ignore it. It's not part of the syllabus. So that the rest of those chapters are kind of untouched. So to be effective, you need to know what to read and when. Lack of knowledge is not that you don't know what is in a particular book, because with Google, every book is at your fingertips. Lack of knowledge is not knowing that the book exists. So from that perspective, the idea of cataloging information is the idea of trying to know a little bit about everything to start off with. Because when it comes time to make logical decisions, to solve problems, the fact that you don't know a piece exists to join from A to B, and you end up having to go and build 3 separate pieces to join A and B, that's inefficient. That's consuming time, and no one writes perfect code, so that's introducing bugs inevitably. So the idea is you need to know a little bit about everything. It's about cataloging information. Learning and growth as a developer has only just begun. Growth is not like it often is at your studies, when you're studying at Varsity or Technicon, or wherever you may be learning your skills from. Over there, you've got your neat courses, you've got your timelines, you've got your tests, and you kind of have an expectation up front of how much you need to know by when, based on what your own expectations are. If you're just happy to pass, if you're aiming for summa cum laude, it depends. But in the real world, in the working world, growth, learning, and understanding is not a straight line. It's not neatly cut up. It's not even a meandering line. It's actually more like a mosaic. You will be growing in different areas at different rates, all at the same time. Why is this? It's because we have different strengths and weaknesses. And as we get stronger, growth comes quicker. Growth becomes easier. Being a solid developer requires a range of skills, both technical and non-technical. In addition to that, personalities, leadership, attitude, these are incredibly important. Many teams will take someone that will do well in their environment and culture over someone that is a strong developer. You can teach someone to be a good developer, but you can't make them get along well with the team or be comfortable and enjoy their time within their environment or their company. Software development, to some respects, is a skill. You're going to learn a set of things, and then you're going to be required to apply them. But being a software developer is an art. And the reason is because there is no one perfect way. You have to choose the best way for you. You have to choose your way, the one that works for the way you think, for the way you approach problems, for your attitude. But almost certainly there is a way for you. In the development world, there are no silver bullets. There are always downsides to any choice that is made. Experience is about being aware of those choices and finding ways to compensate. The best solutions are those where you know how to deal with the downsides of your choices. In the beginning, we are shielded from a lot of this. We have technical leads, team leads, senior developers. Many of them make these decisions, and these responsibilities are on their shoulders. And inevitably, we'll have to solve a problem, and we'll turn to one of them and say, can you assist? I'm not sure how or where to go from here. But as some of those individuals go towards intermediate developers and then towards senior developers, for some of them, they don't seem to make this realization that, you know what, there are no silver bullets. There are difficulties to every choice that we make. There are downsides to every choice that is made. So it's something important to keep in mind. You should interrogate yourself to say, what could be the downsides? You know, perhaps in our current environment, there aren't really any downsides to doing it this way, because the environment is built to take care of those downsides. There may be processes to handle these downsides. But try to think about perhaps work you've done in previous companies or what you know about in other companies, and think about how the kind of difficulties that using this solution will present in those companies. This will assist you in getting a wider idea of the solutions that you work with, of the code that you're working with, rather than just kind of living in that box of everything is fine and this is the perfect way to do things, because there is no perfect way to do things. There's another idea that I call the 90% rule. And I'm sure there's different names for this in different forms. But it's the idea that when you're facing a set of options and you're struggling to choose one of those options, often any of the choices will get you 90% of the way there. Learning to tell the 10% difference between those choices is what is critical. Many people get stuck in analysis paralysis. The idea that you're going to be spending time trying to solve all of your problems up front before going and writing even one line of code, to find the perfect framework, the perfect language. And you kind of have to try to be practical and find that balance that works for you and your company. In studying, and when we do practicals, they are set up one of two ways. Either there is one perfect answer, and if you get it, you get full marks. Otherwise, you get part marks. The other scenario is that it's like a large project, and you're going to spend a fair amount of time doing it, and there's no one perfect way to do it. And inevitably, you're going to end up with some arbitrary mark like 67.28%. But really, no one gets 100%. And this, the idea that this creates, it really isn't great. Because in the real world, it's not about aiming for perfection. Companies can't afford perfection, not in time or money. What it is about is understanding. Interrogate your understanding of something you know. Ask yourself, is this really the right way for all of these different influences to that decision? Choices have upsides and downsides, but it's not just code choices. There are lots of choices outside of the code as well. For example, if I need to make a quick fix after I've built something, how good is my understanding of the tech, the language, or the framework that I'm working with? Is there good documentation? Does it have a big community? Is there strong support on Stack Overflow? These are things that are very important to think about, because these are the real-world difficulties we will face. Fast response, good support and assistance, stability. Always keep these in mind. If we look at just code, good code is about problem solving. If you think of it in terms of Legos, you will get a specification of something that you need to build. If you know what the Lego pieces look like, you can start building it in your head before you even have to go back to your desk. But most of us don't know offhand what every piece of Lego looks like. We can start mixing and matching. For example, we know we need a 4x2 piece. Is there one natively? No idea. But if I can join two 4-wide pieces, I get what I need. So your ability to conceptually solve problems in this manner is an incredibly valuable skill. And it's one that very few people have naturally. It needs to be developed, grown, evolved, and take a form that suits the way that you think, that sits comfortably in your mind. Many times the problems we need to solve is essentially going from A to B. Many software problems are what's called black box. You have an input, and here's the expected output, and it's your job to get from that input to that output. And knowing the different steps that need to be taken is more important than every single detail of every single one of those steps. So that's something to always keep in mind, is to practice. Look at a specification and think, okay, what do I know about how to solve this? What don't I know? And in the beginning, you'll probably know almost nothing. And you'll be missing big pieces. But as you keep this attitude and as you practice with this idea in mind, you will find that you start to keep note of the different blocks, conceptual blocks that are out there. And so each time, as you get better at it, you'll be able to look at a specification and say, yeah, okay, this is going to need about 8 steps. 6 steps I'm comfortable with. I've done that kind of thing before. 2, no, I'm not really so comfortable with those sections. And even to the point where you can say, no, actually, this can't be done. I've looked at these kinds of problems before, and these are the consequences. These are the challenges that we will face. And if you're fortunate in your company, in your environment, there may be non-code, non-software solutions to those particular difficulties. But the fact that you can stand there and say, okay, upfront, without spending days or weeks of company time trying to figure this out, if you can stand there upfront and say, these are the challenges, these are the difficulties that you're going to run into if you attempt to do this, that's massively valuable to any company and to any team. And that's where we want to get to. As an intermediate, as a senior developer, that's where we want to aim for. Okay, and so that kind of covers my thoughts today on the developer mindset. Again, it's just something that we're trying to kind of break up, but there's many topics that will be touched on over and over again as we go through these lessons. Can we have a look? Have there been any questions? So if there is anyone who has any questions, please, you're welcome to post it into chat, and I will answer as best as to my knowledge. In addition to that, if you're watching the stream at a later time, we have a Discord server. The link is in the right below the channel details. If you scroll down, you'll find details to the Discord server there. We have a questions and answers channel in there as well, so you're most welcome to go and post your questions in there, and we will try our best to answer it. All right, let's see. There's one question come through on Discord. Junior, mid-level, senior developers. What sets each apart from each other? How will I know when I reach the next level? So this is a question and a half. So for many companies, this is a very clear-cut line. HR is often involved, as it's often to do with pay grades. And there's often, I think there's almost everywhere that I've heard of or been to, it's based around this idea of years of experience. Although I will say that number is different from company to company. Everyone kind of starts off as a junior, and that's usually till around 3 years of experience. Mid-level can be from about 3 to, I'd say, even 6 and 7 years in some cases. And one of the reasons is mid-level developers often go through a tech switch. And the reason that happens is many companies will give junior developers maintenance work. And the maintenance work is going to be on older technologies. It's going to be a lot of bug fixes on their existing systems. And based on that, they kind of get stuck. The seniors, they get to work on the shiny, new, interesting stuff that everyone wants on their CVs. And so they get to move on with having skills that are more relevant in the current workplace. And juniors, unfortunately, many of them don't pay attention to that space in terms of what skills are other companies looking for that I want to get involved in and put their efforts and time into that space. They kind of get tasks and work, and they do that. And it's good for the day-to-day, and you will improve your general development skills in that space. But because there's not much looking ahead, after about 3 or 4 years, they'll reach the mid-level intermediate developer stage, and then they're kind of stuck because many companies are not wanting to hire them or seniors based on their technology because of the fact that it's not what they're using at the moment. So a number of intermediate developers tend to go through that switch, and then they're kind of a little bit jammed for a while because, say I've got 4 years of experience working on a particular old technology, and now I switch over to something new. A year later, when you've got 5 years of experience, you've only actually got 1 year experience working in the new technology. And so you're not considered at that point even an intermediate in that new technology. And so if you're going to move, you would move to another intermediate position, or you would kind of have to almost go down or take a pay cut to continue working with the new technology. So many of them kind of stay at that intermediate level for longer than usual, simply because of the fact that they need to get enough years of experience in a more relevant technology or skill. Senior developers. The main difference between senior developers and those below them is that they need to bear responsibility. As a junior, there's a lot of hand-holding that goes on, and that's expected on both sides. The seniors know that you know very little and that you're going to come and ask them a question every 5 minutes. The juniors also know this because they do have very little experience, and they're in a foreign environment with foreign technologies, and they've got a lot of catch up to do. So they need that comfort to be able to go and ask seniors, ask intermediates for assistance. And as a mid-level or intermediate developer, you start getting a little bit more independence. And this varies wildly from developer to developer. But the seniors and the team leads will start to give you smaller tasks that you should be able to go and do by yourself with very little assistance from any of the other developers. And as a senior developer, the expectation is that any task you can do by yourself. So that's that idea that you need to be able to take full responsibility for what you're working on and forge your own way and responsibly find answers to your problems. That's one of the main expectations of a senior developer. And so in my experience, the years of experience idea is really not the best tell. Not to say that there is. When you're sitting across the table from an interview candidate, it's really, really difficult to even tell, to get a clear idea on simple things, let alone more complicated things like, what's this person's work ethic like? What's their sense of personal responsibility like? So those are difficult. So senior developers, they have that sense of responsibility on their shoulders. And, there's other ways to kind of think of skills, and in addition to years of experience, the number of online technical tests that companies do. So, and that'll give you a wide idea of, or a very detailed idea of what is this individual's skill level in a particular technology or a particular framework or a particular language. But at the end of the day, it's up to the senior people in the company to kind of judge a person and say, this is what we're kind of looking for. This is the attitudes that we're looking for. This is the level of commitment we're looking for. This is the skill level we're looking for. Or, this is what we're looking for based on what we're willing to pay. So all of those will kind of determine, your chances of joining a company, of getting through the interview process. So that takes us to the next question, which is, leaving college, what is the best way of looking for a dev job? So that's a very wide question, and it has to do with from interviewing skills, CV skills, kind of knowing what choices to make and where to put your time during that period where you're trying to find work. So it is a really large question. There are two things that are, I think, incredibly critical. Firstly, the people who are going through CVs, especially for juniors, especially towards the beginning of the year, where there are many people who have come out of college and are looking for work, they often make a decision as to whether or not they're going to read the rest of the CV within about 15 seconds, believe it or not. So your CV, the aim of the CV, the point of the CV needs to be to get one foot in the door. You need to get this person just interested enough in a very short space of time to say, okay, this might look interesting. And that's it. This person doesn't need to know what your marks in matric were, because it's irrelevant. And if he really wanted to know, if he was like, oh, okay, this guy went to the same school as me, I wonder how well he did, you know, they can ask you. That's what interviews are for. And if they want more information, but they're intrigued by what they see on your CV, they'll contact you. There's absolutely no question about that. They will contact you and say, listen, we like what, you know, we're interested in what we see on your CV. Can you just answer these few questions for us? And basically the rest of that company specific gap will get filled via that process. In many cases, they may just call you in. They go through, if they're looking for juniors, they'll go through many interviews, and they may just call you in for an interview and say, okay, so we liked what we saw, but what about this? What about that? What about that? And they'll speak to you about what they would like to know. So there's that. There's a whole lot I can go into about interviewing, but basically a lot of that information is available online. Take what you can and just be aware that some of interview information is locally based. What works in the US may not work in the UK or may not work in South Africa. So just keep that in mind when you're reading up on the stuff, when you're watching videos on the stuff. It is, I think, a really good idea to practice with friends, practice with your parents, practice with anyone. You have a list of questions and tell them, ask me these questions in different orders. The idea being that you can kind of get comfortable with the process. There are many who are seniors who are still incredibly uncomfortable with the interview process. And it's just a matter of getting comfortable with it, practicing the process, getting ideas of what would happen, and then going for it. So the one thing is the getting yourself into the door, right? The other thing is, and also kind of related to that, you kind of got to try to stand out. You need to have something that not everyone else has. And many developers think along the lines of like course marks, you know, oh, I've got a good mark in a graphics course, and that's gonna serve me well. A lot of companies really don't pay too much attention to what your marks are, other than to determine, okay, you know what, perhaps for our company we need some good math skills for certain reasons, and then a math mark becomes important. But almost always, if they see that you can learn to code, that's good enough for them. They want to see other things that make you stand out, such as, you know, perhaps I've learned some language, or you know, some math-based language, even though my maths marks were not great. You know what? I did a Udemy course on MathLab, and oh, how about that? Our company uses MathLab. That automatically puts you at an advantage of all of the other guys who got 90s in maths and great software marks, but none of them have ever used MathLab before. So it's trying to set yourself above the pack, and there are a number of different ways to do that as well. And that is something that we will chat about more in one of the other lectures. Okay. Here's another question, very much along those same lines. What should I learn in my spare time to give me an edge going into the dev workspace? All right, so that's exactly what I was saying. There are many different ways to do it. But what you want to do is you want to try to get maximum efficiency out of what you do have. And the two biggest determining factors of whether or not you're going to get hired is A, is your CV doing what it's supposed to be doing? And B, how well do you interview? That really is what it's going to come down to. Because there are very few developers who have the mindset to think, where exactly I want to be. Now, there are very few people who come in with a mindset and say, oh, I want to be in Microsoft. I want to go work at Oracle. Or I want to work in the banking sector. The very few developers kind of have that focus. For many of them, it's a case of, okay, I've learned this knowledge. I want to go out there and work. I want to put my skills to use. And so whether they're working at a bank, whether they're working at a three-man dev company, it doesn't make too much difference to them. And so what it becomes really is it becomes a numbers game. You want to try to get into as many interviews as possible. And for that, you need a good CV, an effective CV. And an effective CV is largely just saying, this is me, and this is what I've done that's going to put me over and above the rest. There's some CVs that I've seen over the years that's walls. It's like 20-page documents. And it really tells me that this person has not even gone to just Google what are signs of a good CV. The simplest thing to say, I'm putting the CV out there. People are going to see it. I should at least put a little bit of effort into saying, how can I make a decent CV? So that's what it's about. It's having a good CV and then interviewing well. Okay, so I think that's going to cover it for today. If there is any other questions, please drop it in the chat. And if you come across this sometime down the line, like I've said before, there's our Discord server. We're there most of the time to try to assist. And at the end of the day, the aim is to try to create a community, a space where those with little working experience can go and try to get assistance, some guidance, some feedback, some idea of what they're getting into. And hopefully that can help them with a good career and help them with good code. So on that note, I bid everyone farewell from this crispy, cool Durban evening. Take care.